Is the microphone on? Great. Hi everyone, and thanks Tim for just stole half my presentation, rattling off my career. What I'm going to do today is do a presentation in three parts, and somewhere there's one of these things to click, right? I'm going to do a presentation in three parts. First I'm going to talk about the last 50 years, and that'll be more of a colourful piece, right? I'll then talk about humankind's biggest challenge, right? And that's going to take us to some darker places. And then I'm going to sort of lighten the whole thing up and talk about IGO and some of the things that we're doing there. And then I'll just end with some takeaway points for people to digest on their trip back to the office. Before I do that, I just wanted to make a few acknowledgements. So number one, I want to acknowledge everyone that's come here today, and thank you for coming along. Absolutely fantastic to see such a turnout. Second, I wanted to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on all of the areas that where our activities are based. And last but not least, I wanted to acknowledge the current committee of the WA Mining Club, who continue to do a fantastic job and to continue building the WA Mining Club into the real cornerstone of networking and learning within the mining industry and leveraging on what all of their predecessors have done previously over the last 50 years since the WA Mining Club was formed in 1972. So 1972, I was going to say, where were you in 72? But half of you might not have been born, right? But it was a very interesting time. We had William McMahon as Prime Minister of Australia, soon to be replaced at the end of the year by Gough Whitlam. We had Richard Nixon in Washington with the early murmurings of Watergate starting to bubble to the surface. We had Mao in China, and we had Brezhnev in the USSR. And all across the world, we were listening to the greatest music ever created. Right? And I certainly know today that the greater proportion of my eclectic music collection it comes from the music of this era. And for those that weren't around at that time, the way you got to learn about music was you either listened to the radio station or you waited till the top 40 came out in the paper, and then you knew what you had to go to the record shop and buy. What was I doing in 1972? I was in Dalwallinu, and a small country town about 2.5 hours drive northeast of Perth. Grew up partly on the farm. It was pretty hungry farming country out there, right on the fringes of the wheat belt, and then spent the rest of the time growing up in the Dalwallinu town. And as you can see from the main street of Dalwallinu here, this picture's only a couple of years old, but was probably quieter in 1972. There wasn't a lot to do, very similar to most country towns. And there was certainly no internet in 1972. And although we had TV, the test signal was telecast more than the programs were. So what you did was you got involved in everything that was going. And for me, that was Aussie rules football in the winter. It was competitive swimming in the summer. And then outside sport, the sort of things I got involved with was some musical theatre. Did some HMS Pinafore in Oklahoma. If someone passes a hat around and raises enough money, I'll burst into song. And then also did some, because my mum thought it was the right thing to do and it would help my football prowess, I did some ballet. It didn't really help the football prowess. But what was more fun was some Scottish sword dancing that I did with a group of 8. And this lucky lady here was my Scottish dancing partner. And this, obviously we're not doing the Scottish dancing here because I'd have a kilt on, right? But and obviously we're not dancing to some of that greatest music ever created because we might look a bit different. We were probably dancing to the Pride of Erin. But I was resplendent with white and green paisley shirt, green flared trousers and black and British Racing green platform shoes. Sort of think about KISS-style platform shoes. And I was going to school, junior high school at the Dalwallinu School. And at that time, as you can imagine, small country town, small classes, and the WA education system was going through a period of streaming. So we're taking those small classes and breaking them down into even smaller streams with an advanced stream, an intermediate stream, and a basic stream. So I was lucky enough to be in the advanced stream, 4 to 6 kids per class, and all of the rest of the class were girls. And they were super smart, right? And really challenged me and made me be better in junior high school than I might have otherwise been. You know, without that competition, my lazy side might have come through. And so out of that was born, out of that 3 years, huge respect for women. At that same time, in the highlands of Hawaii, where they measure the atmospheric CO2 in the atmosphere in 1972, the year the WA Mining Club was born, was 327 parts per million. And it has already increased from the 315 parts per million when they started testing in the year that I was born in 1958. 10 years later, on the 10th anniversary of the WA School of Mines, it had upticked to 342 parts per million. And I'd gone on from junior high school to senior high school, university. I'd had that sliding doors moment where I decided not to be a doctor and be a metallurgist instead, because it'd be so much more fun, right? And I'd had an early start to my career in mineral sands and gold. And here I transitioned out of that, and in 1982 I was starting at the titanium dioxide pigment plant that Laporte was running just outside of Bunbury. And this was a fantastic place to work. You know, technically challenging. You know, more unit processes here than anything that any of us are working on today. And the company had a real interest in people's growth. So I had more career development than any other time in my career. And you know, that's one of the takeaways that's then I've carried with me over time, and it's one of the things that we focus on at IGO. I stayed here through to 1986. I did some time in R&D, quality control, and plant management. And at that point realised that the people above me were never going to leave unless they died, because Bunbury was such a nice place to live. So I decided to move on, and I went back into gold, and I spent a few years in the Murchison at projects like Reedy's, Gidgee, and Plutonic. So by 1992, I'd come out of the Murchison and I was in Ghana, still in gold. And this is the 20th anniversary of the WA Mining Club. And CO2, atmospheric CO2 has risen to 356 parts per million. Here we just completed building a gold project. We did that on time and on budget. We did it without email, without telephone, without the benefit of overnight courier to get all those last minute things that the engineers forgot. And it was a great outcome. And I continued to work in Ghana in gold for the next decade or so, and transitioned across a number of companies. And then in 2002, found myself in the US running a Canadian company with the assets in Ghana and obviously run by an Australian. And that really defines the mining industry, doesn't it? We're diverse in all ways. And in 2002, which is the 30th anniversary now of the WA Mining Club, the atmospheric CO2 is up to 374, and I was starting to get my first interaction with electric cars. And I think the blue one there on the left-hand side, that'd be my son Brick, who's in the audience today, and he's out soliciting opportunities as an internship in communications. So see Brick on the table over there if you're interested. I stayed in that role till 2008, and then having reached the ripe old age of 50, decided it was time to retire. And we retired to the north coast of New South Wales. We built a house as owner builders, put in our fruit trees, our veggie garden, 10 kilowatts of solar on the roof and our own water supply with harvesting the water from the roof, and we were going to live a sustainable existence. And we did that for a few years, and I progressively built up a number of board roles, working in New Guinea, Australia, Namibia, and the DRC. And over time, by 2012, I'd been sucked right into nearly a full-time role with that DRC role, and spending the majority of my time there. And having reached that conclusion, decided maybe I'll go back to work. But in 2012, on the 40th anniversary of the WA Mining Club, CO2 in the air is upticked again to 394. So I did exactly that. I went back to work, and I've had a fantastic last 8.5 years with IGO, and we're having lots of fun there, aren't we, team? And this year, atmospheric CO2 is at 419 parts per million. And you can see that trend there. It's resolutely going upwards. And over my lifetime, it's gone up more than 100 ppm. And over the course of the life of the WA Mining Club, it's gone up plus minus 90 ppm. And for a long time, people have realised that CO2 and other gases in the atmosphere is going to lead to a greenhouse effect. And this was first promulgated by scientists in the mid-1800s. The mid-1800s. And then by 1965, the US President's Science Advisory Committee opined that, yes, atmospheric CO2 will contribute to a greenhouse effect, and it will, by 2000, start to lead to demonstrable climate change. And that was one of the drivers for some of those early discussions around what we do around CO2, what we do about climate change. And one of the first was the Stockholm Earth Summit in 1972, the year the WA Mining Club was formed. And since then, there's been a succession of congregations of scientists and policymakers talking about the subject, talking about CO2s, talking about climate change, talking about our global response. And although we've talked about it a lot, we still haven't addressed the problem, because CO2 in the air is still going up and global temperatures continue to march upwards. Currently sitting at about 1.3 degrees above the pre-industrial average, and that's an average for the period 1850 to 1900. And they've taken my slide away. Thank you. And going forward, we could expect one of a number of outcomes, right? And they're laid out on the slide here. There's the stated policies that people have made, and if we can achieve that going forward, we're going to see global temperatures rise between 2.5% and 3% by the end of the century. And that's just at the midpoint. There's a 50% probability that it could be higher than that, and there's a 50% probability it could be lower. And then there's the other couple of scenarios, and the green one there is the net zero scenario, achieving net zero by 2050 and minimising temperature increases to less than 1.5%. So we've got a very short period of time, the next couple of decades, to address this climate change and to stop this trajectory and to reduce the risk of creating change to the planet that could last for millennia. And the sort of changes I'm talking about here at that 2 to 3 degree level are unpleasant. They're not palatable. We've got heat waves. We've got greater proportions of the Earth's landmass having more tropical conditions and subject to tropical diseases. We've got food production areas becoming dust bowls. We've got rising sea levels, which result with an exodus of people away from coastal areas, climate refugees, if you like. And all of that is very unpleasant. But as I said, that's at the midpoint, or in that 50% probability above the midpoint. There is the chance that we are in that lower 50%, and we could be lucky and we see global temperatures level off earlier. But as Clint Eastwood would say, how lucky do you feel? Right? So let's, ppm, that's hard to understand. Temperature rise, maybe we can understand that. But let's put this in units of that perhaps we relate to. Gigatons of CO2 equivalent being ejected into the atmosphere. Currently, we're belching 40 gigatons per year of CO2 into the atmosphere. It's a huge amount. We saw a little bit of an abatement in the first year of COVID. It came off by 5%, but that's charged straight back again the year following. Going forward, if we stick to the pre-Paris Accord agreements, that just continues to rise. We continue to belch CO2 into the atmosphere. And then you've got the various policy metrics below that, and then the green is the net zero, getting from 40 gigatons per year down to just over 0 gigatons per year. That is a huge task. But if we want to keep global temperature rise to less than 1.5%, that is the challenge that we all face, individually and collectively. Organisations have roadmaps on how we do this. We need less of that and more of that. The bit we need less of is unabated coal, oil, and natural gas. The bits we need more of is renewable energy, electrification of transport, carbon capture, capturing the opportunity with hydrogen, etc. And every year, every decade between now and 2050, we need to deliver into this roadmap. So by 2030, just 8 years from now, we've got to increase the rate of renewable energy additions by 4 times on an annual basis. That's huge. We've got to increase the EV sales from the 6.6 million units we had last year to 60 million units by 2030. That's huge. That's why every day when you read the paper, you can read about another gigafactory being built, because that's what we have to do to produce the batteries to achieve this level of electrification on our roads. We commonly talk to this in our corporate presentations, but when we do, we rely on Bloomberg New Energy Finance numbers. These are the orange columns on the chart. And by 2030, Bloomberg New Energy Finance predict that we're going to need 3,500 gigawatt hours of battery capacity to meet the electric vehicle requirements. And for that, we're going to need to produce 3.5 million tonnes per annum of LCE. We're going to need to produce 1.4 million tonnes per annum of additional nickel, and we're going to have to produce 4.3 million tonnes per annum of additional copper. That's huge. We all understand the industry. We all know how difficult it is to build mining projects, so these increases are absolutely huge. But that doesn't get us to net zero. To get to net zero, we have to do 6,600 gigawatt hours of battery capacity by 2030. Nearly double. So nearly double those metal requirements. It sounds near impossible, right? And we know in the industry that these deposits aren't falling off trees. They're getting harder to find. Discovery rates are going down. We know that exploration and discovery is getting more challenging. We're having to look deeper. We're having to explore in more difficult jurisdictions. And project developments are getting more challenging. The average project development in the decade up to 2019 was 17 years. 17 years from discovery through to production. That's a long time. And before that, we've got to make the discoveries, right? And we all know what the problems are. The problems are how long it takes to get land access, permitting and approvals, the increasing complexity of the projects that we are finding, because the dripping roasts, that were easy, they were done before, right? And then the access to people and resources to be able to achieve that. But we have the opportunity amongst us, the mining community, in collaboration with society and government, to turn things around and get things moving faster. To increase our investment in exploration, to do more collaboration around exploration R&D to try and find new ways of making discoveries faster, working with government and the community to streamline permitting and approvals, but without compromising the due diligence we would do. It shouldn't take as long as we take to get the approvals we get. The work certainly doesn't take that long. We need to find new ways of mining, new ways of processing, new ways of refining. We need innovation to reduce the timelines, the capital cost to build, and to reduce the ESG impact. And we need to work out how we can weave recycling into our processing and refining operations to leverage off the stream of critical minerals that will come in the future as batteries get to end of mine life. Australia has been a laggard for many years, and it's therefore pleasing to see some of the narrative that's now coming out of Canberra. And I was at this energy forum in Sydney a couple of weeks ago and listening to Anthony Albanese talk, and we look forward to that narrative turning into action and Australia taking that leading role and leveraging the resources that we do have, sun, wind and critical minerals, to be a key part of this solution. IGO likes to think it's part of the solution. You know, our purpose is making a difference. Whoa. And just let me get back. Our purpose and our purpose narrative talk to our commitment to responding to climate change, to finding, mining and refining those critical metals that are required to make renewable energy and the electrification of transport possible. And we talk to the why. You know, the why is creating a better planet for future generations. And that informs, now it doesn't want to go anywhere, right? That informs our strategy, and we call our strategy our winning aspiration. Our winning aspiration is to be a globally relevant company focused on clean energy metals to create a better planet. And within that, we don't want to be narrow, and we don't want to just do nickel, or we don't want to do lithium. We want to do everything. Any contribution that we can make to a better planet is what we want to do, and we want to do that safely, ethically, sustainably and reliably. We want to be across the discovery process, we want to be in the upstream mining, and we want to be downstream. We want to be connected to customers so we can understand what they're thinking, so we can start to refocus our energies and what we're exploring for early as we start to understand what their future requirements are. We're committed to being carbon neutral, and we know we can only achieve this through people, having the best people in the team and working collaboratively with people outside the team. We transitioned our strategy back at the end of 2017. Up to that point, we were your bog standard gold and base metals mining company. We put the new purpose in place, we changed the strategy, and over the last few years, we have transformed our portfolio. And the key steps to that transformation are laid out on the page here. We entered into a joint venture with Tianqi to form a lithium JV, and one of our partners at the Greenbushes level, Albemarle's here today as well. Great to see them here. And we went on from that transaction to sell the gold asset that we had. And we can't see the benefit for us as a clean energy metals company continuing to hold a gold asset going forward. And we've done 2 transactions to increase our nickel portfolio. And the most recent one of those we closed just over a month ago, which was the acquisition of Western Areas. So today we're producing nickel, lithium, and some copper and cobalt byproduct credits. We're invested in exploration, we're invested in upstream mining, and we're invested in downstream processing. So what I'm going to do is just give you a bit of a potted summary of the business as it is today. Won't spend too long here because I'll have Cassandra up there giving me the warning bell. And I'll break that into 2 parts. First, I'll talk about our nickel business, and then I'll talk about the lithium business. So nickel. We've got a really good portfolio now of producing development stage, exploration stage projects, and we're also starting to do further work on what we can do downstream to produce nickel sulfate for the electric vehicle battery industry. Nova, many of you know well. I've been up here, I've talked about Nova before, and it's just been an outstanding mine, producing consistent nickel units with some copper and cobalt contributions, and is the lowest cost nickel producer in Australia. And it has really strong ESG fundamentals, and has one of the lowest carbon intensities of all nickel producers globally. So a really great asset. Cosmos and Forrestania came to us as a result of the Western Areas transaction. Cosmos is a great opportunity. It's in the development stage. We're expecting to commence production mid-next year, and that mine will go for at least 10 years, and we believe that with the benefit of a feasibility study on Mount Good, we'll be able to take that out 20 years or more. Forrestania, many of you know it well. It's been operating for a long time. It's had a long and successful history, and we're convinced that at Forrestania and Cosmos, there's more nickel to find. So through our exploration team, we'll be doing the work to understand the potential there while continuing to explore our portfolio of belt scale assets and progressing that downstream nickel sulfate study. Talk now to the lithium business. Great photo here of the Kwinana refinery, and the lithium business is our JV with Tianqi, and it's a global JV outside China. So whatever we both do, we do together. And the key components on the upstream and downstream there are Greenbushes, the world's largest, lowest cost operating hard rock lithium mine, and the Kwinana refinery. And together we're marketing that product, and together we're looking at exploration opportunities. Absolutely fantastic assets, and if anyone's looked at our results we published yesterday, starting to generate really good financial outcomes for IGO. I touched there on exploration, and I'll just give you a very high-level view of what we're doing in that area. You can see our portfolio on a page. The team calculated the footprint we have in Australia. It's about 1% of Australia's landmass. It's a huge area, and we've committed $75 million for the coming 12 months for the exploration of this portfolio, and covering nickel, copper, cobalt, lithium, and rare earths. We've got some of our first rare earth opportunities on the page there. We believe that's one of the better portfolios, if not the best portfolio in Australia at the moment. And we also believe we've got the best-in-class exploration team with in-house geophysical and geochemical capability. One of the things we focus on is investing in the right science within the business, but also collaborating with partners outside IGO to make sure that we are doing the R&D in collaboration with others to improve our understanding of the terrains that we're searching in and to increase the probability of our success. When I talked earlier about our winning aspiration, I talked to producing a diverse suite of products and doing that safely, sustainably, ethically, and reliably. So ESG and sustainability is built into the very fabric of the DNA of the business. And over the last 8 years, we've gone on a journey of continuous improvement in the practices that we have in the business, the performance that we achieve, and the reporting that we do. And along the journey, we've attracted global recognition for what we do. And some of those are set out on the page. And one that we're really proud of is the inclusion in the Sustainability Yearbook. Only 19 companies globally in the mining and metals section of the Sustainability Yearbook, and IGO is one of those. Absolutely fantastic outcome. Part of our sustainability response is our climate change response, and we've been tackling this for a number of years. We put our first solar farm into Nova in 2019, and this year we're leveraging on that to build our second solar farm and put in place our first battery storage. That will allow us to operate for up to 9 hours per day with no gensets on. Absolutely fantastic. We've also adopted our own internal carbon price, and it's that carbon price that generates the funding to provide the resources to do these projects. And we'll continue to roll those out going forward, and we look forward to the opportunity that Cosmos creates to really put in place a showpiece in the Australian mining industry for an electrified mine. Before wrapping up and hitting that 2-minute warning that Cassandra just gave me, I just want to talk about people, because none of what I've talked about up to date is possible without people. And when I talk about people, it's holistically, and it's about the direct IGO employees in the team, but it's also our partners that work with us to get the outcomes that we get. And it's great to see so many of our partners in the room today, whether they be suppliers or contractors or bankers, etc. A key part of our culture at IGO is care. And you would have seen that come through in our purpose statement. It's all about care. And that manifests itself in how we care for people's safety, whether it's their physical safety, their mental safety, or their financial safety. And a key part of that is making sure everyone has the confidence that they've got a safe working environment, and making sure that we have the practices and training within the business to make sure that there is no bullying, there is no harassment. We all need to call it out. Enough is enough. This focus on culture at IGO has again attracted some external recognition. And this year we were the 4th place in the AFR National Best Place to Work in the mining, agriculture and utilities industries. A great outcome, and some of the outcomes of what we do in the business to develop a strong culture are shown on the page there. 29% female participation in the business, 5.2% Indigenous participation in the business. Really great to see. So everyone, thank you very much for coming along today. I really appreciate it. Hope you've had some benefit from the presentation, but I'd just like to reiterate some of the key themes. Climate change is real. The scientists will now tell you that they are 95% certain that climate change is real. Individually and collectively, we need action to create a better planet for future generations. Minerals are critical to this, and we need to work together with the community, with government, to work out how we can progress our exploration faster, how we can progress our mining developments faster. And last but not least, enough is enough. Let's get rid of bullying and harassment in our industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I'll get you to stay where you are if you wouldn't mind, because we have got a few questions that have come through on the Slido app. Thank you to those who contributed on the questions. The most popular one is a cracker, but I'll leave that for last. If anyone's on there, you know the one I'm talking about. It's the most popular or endorsed question on the list, but it's a little bit off topic. There's a couple of questions here around electric vehicles and infrastructure, so I'll paraphrase here, but how do you propose to address that in a realistic and timely way? The changes to infrastructure needs as we get more and more EVs on the road.
Yeah, and again, that needs to, we need policy. If we take the Australia, for example, we need a policy framework and to put the infrastructure development on steroids. And you only have to go to other jurisdictions to know that it's possible. New Zealand, for example, is in a far better position than Australia, and more electric vehicles are sold in New Zealand as a result. So policy first, and then roll out the infrastructure. But sometimes people make it a bigger deal of it than it really is. I never charge anywhere except at home. And you don't really need that infrastructure unless you're travelling long distances, and that's where that policy initiatives from government need to be focused.
Last time you were presenting before us, Peter, you talked about trading in your gas-guzzling V8 for a Tesla and boasting how quickly it could go, 0 to 100 in whatever it was. How many speeding fines have you had?
I've had none in the Tesla. But it's been a fantastic car, and I think it was here in about September, October 2019, right?
Yep.
So I've had it about 3 years, and absolutely fantastic vehicle, and I just wouldn't go backwards now. And in fact, I have put myself in the queue for an upgrade, the Tesla S-Plaid. It's pretty easy to do because you just get in there, you order it, you pay the $350 refundable deposit, and if you change your mind in the future, you get your $350 back, right?
Very good. Fingers crossed. All right, this one from an anonymous member of the audience. How would you compare the current challenge versus the hole in the ozone layer in the 80s and 90s?
I truly think that what we have today is far bigger, because what we're talking about is if we get to a saturation point, then the effect may last thousands of years. And we know from that example there, hole in the ozone layer, people got together, they knew what the problem was, and they put in place targets to reduce CFCs, right? And we've got the example of what can be achieved. Let's repeat the example.
Should mining organisations be contributing to research in new battery technology to best utilise our existing assets?
Say that one again.
Should mining organisations be contributing to research in new battery technology?
That's an interesting one. What does everyone think? Hands up, who thinks yes? Who thinks no, just stick to your knitting? Yeah, I'll go with the audience.
Yeah. Wasn't an overwhelming yes, but I think the yes vote has it. Volvo put out a paper, combustible car up to, let me count the zeros, I think that's 1 million kilometres, total better carbon footprint than an EV vehicle over manufacture and operation. So why buy an electric vehicle?
I haven't done the work on that, so I can't comment.
Okay, nicely deflected. Thank you very much. Well, maybe we'll hit you up the next time you're here. With copper-producing countries in South America going through a rough patch at the moment, do you see Australia embracing low-grade operations soon?
You've got to imagine with that scarcity coming along, that demand and that supply gap, that incentive prices ultimately have got to be a lot higher. And as a result, that's going to create more opportunities in Australia. And we have wonderful sediment-hosted copper basins here, which have just not had enough exploration, and that's one of our focuses at IGO.
All right, this one from Imogen. If companies could make one small change tomorrow to reach net zero, what should it be? So, if companies... Yeah, I suppose it's fairly broad, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the thing that all of us can do, like reduce. There's so many ways to reduce. Do you need all those lights on? Does the company need to have all of that demand going all the time? What can we do to reduce it? At a personal level, more walking, more cycling, more public transport. If you don't have an EV, rely on those, and we can then carry that same theme through into our businesses. At Nova, when we put our first solar farm in, that reduced our CO2 emissions by 11%. Our second solar farm reduces it by 24%. We can do real things, and those solar farms for us have been good for the planet, but they've been good for our balance sheet as well, because it's a better economic outcome than burning oil.
Final question, and like I said, easily the most popular question that's been submitted so far, and I think you brought this on yourself, Peter, by mentioning it early on. Can you still pull off any of your ballet dance moves?
Yeah, absolutely, but only in a dark room with no furniture, right?
That's the best time to dance. So it's a yes, but he's not going to show you right now.
No.
A couple of people too would like to see your slides again a little bit later on as well, so they can follow them in their own time. So if you wouldn't mind providing them to those who are after it. I don't know, maybe come and see Peter, who's just sitting at the front here, after we're done here. Thank you, Peter. I'll invite Natalie back.
Thanks, everyone.
Now for an official vote of thanks.
Thank Thank you, Peter. As always, it was very entertaining and it's always informative. It's a little bit scary how high our emissions are, but obviously we've got that target of 2030 and hopefully everyone's going to be following in the footsteps of IGO because they're doing a great job in that space of reducing that. And I have to say, obviously, as well, we've all got to target ourselves to actually make sure that we're reducing it at home, not just as an industry. I have my stepson tell me every day, what am I doing to reduce it a little bit each day? So I actually give that out to everyone to take it on as an action and see what you can do, and maybe in 50 years we can come back and see how we achieved it. But thank you for setting the standard as well. I know when we sat down and had our speaker briefing, you spoke about the culture of IGO, and I've seen how great the culture has been and how well you actually embrace the females and the diversity within the company, and I hope that other companies can actually learn from what you're doing at IGO. So thank you very much.
Thank you.